2025 is your year.
2025.
Start it right with New Year, New You on iHeartRadio.
New year, new you.
Good vibes playlists like party hits, chill tracks on lo-fi, and motivational podcasts to crush your resolutions. From wellness, finances, travel, and more.
Let's go.
New year,
New year,
new you.
new you.
Explore it all
Feel brand new.
at iHeartRadio.ca and on the free iHeartRadio app. This week in gaming with Naomi Kyle.
Hi, I'm Naomi Kyle, and welcome back to This Week in Gaming. This week, we're catching up on the news and drama at the biggest tech show of the year, the next collaboration between Nintendo and LEGO, Assassin's Creed Shadows gets delayed again, and are 100-hour gaming experiences a thing of the past? We've got all of this week's gaming news, so let's get started. Before Sony broke into the video game scene 30 years ago, Sony founded their own production studio, Sony Pictures, to create iconic films such as Total Recall and The Fifth Element. In the years since, Sony has sheepishly explored the idea of translating their video game properties into movies, but their attempts at Silent Hill, Resident Evil, and others proved to be less successful than they had hoped, making the idea of future video game adaptations less appealing. But thanks to the recent success of video game movies like Sonic, Mario, and Detective Pikachu, Sony seems more invested than ever to give video game adaptations another shot. At the biggest technology trading show of the year, the Consumer Electronics Show 2025, otherwise known as CES, Sony took to the stage for an hour-long press conference where they discussed Sony's long-term creative vision for their next 10 years. The first of these announcements was confirmed by head of PlayStation Productions, Asad Kizilbash, who said, "Looking ahead as to what might come next, I'm excited to announce we are working with Sony Pictures on developing a film adaptation of our amazingly popular PlayStation game, Helldivers 2. In a bizarre twist of irony, Helldivers 2, which is inspired by the sci-fi cult classic Starship Troopers, is now coming full circle and being adapted into a movie itself. But Mr. Kizilbash wasn't done there. He went right into dropping another big announcement. Columbia Pictures and PlayStation Studios are in the early stages of developing a film adaptation of the award-winning Horizon Zero Dawn. Just imagine Aloy's beloved origin story set in a vibrant, far-future world filled with giant machines, brought to you for the first time on the big screen. PlayStation and Columbia Pictures are likely working together again based on the success of the Uncharted movie, despite the film receiving poor reviews from critics. The real cherry on top of PlayStation's press conference was the announcement of what will be the first anime adaptation of a PlayStation game, Ghost of Tsushima. PlayStation Studios is collaborating with Aniplex to produce the Ghost of Tsushima anime, and they have plans for it to air in 2027 exclusively on the anime streaming platform Crunchyroll, which is co-owned by PlayStation and Aniplex. However, the anime's premise is said to be derived from the story in the game's free multiplayer update, Legends, and not the game's main story that is already said to be in development as a feature-length film. The news from CES 2025 continues. Video game accessories manufacturer Genki brought a Switch 2 mock-up to the convention that they used to demonstrate a case they were working on for Nintendo's next console. The mock-up was a detailed 3D print of the unreleased console, complete with magnetically attaching Joy-Con. Gaming press outlets across the globe ran the story, and news of yet another Switch 2 leak quickly spread. It didn't take long for news of Genki's console mock-up to reach the ears of Nintendo. They swiftly went on the offensive and reached out to CNET, saying that the gaming hardware that Genki presented as Nintendo hardware at CES is unofficial and was not provided to the company by us. Nintendo may have privately done some retaliation of their own, as Genki has now started walking back their previous claims that their mock-up at CES was based on the real Switch 2. The Japanese gaming outlet GameSpark reported that a representative from Genki admitted in an interview that the mock-up at CES was actually based on the leaks that have been making their rounds on the internet over the past few months. Having to constantly be on damage control is probably starting to wear on Nintendo. I hope for their sake that they announce another Nintendo Direct soon so the public can finally see what they've been working on and everyone can breathe a sigh of relief. Moving on, Nintendo and LEGO have been collaborating for nearly 5 years to bring consumers Nintendo-themed LEGO sets that have gone to sell out in the blink of an eye. The whole affair began back in March 2020 when Nintendo announced their collaboration with LEGO to develop LEGO sets featuring an interactive Mario figure. In the time since, the collaboration has spawned sets designed around Animal Crossing, Zelda, and even a Nintendo Entertainment System complete with a LEGO TV to play the iconic Super Mario Bros. Level 1-1. Their latest set will be designed around another piece of classic Nintendo memorabilia, the Game Boy. Nintendo announced the new LEGO set with a short video post on their Twitter account showing off LEGO bricks shaped like the Game Boy's emblematic D-pad and purple buttons. There is no exact release date for the set yet, or even a complete picture of what the set will look like, but Nintendo says it will hit store shelves sometime in October 2025. Ubisoft's next AAA title, Assassin's Creed Shadows, was initially anticipated to release on November 15th, 2024, last year. Then it was pushed 3 months to release in February, and now it has been postponed 1 more month to release on March 20th. I've covered many video game delays in the time that this podcast has been on air, and longtime listeners know by now that I think delays are actually great. If a game isn't done, that's totally fine. Take all the time you need to make your game everything you ever imagined it to be. But for Ubisoft, this is an issue that goes beyond the consumer and straight to the shareholder. In 2021, the market value of Ubisoft stock was about $20, and year after year, it has decreased steadily to where it sits at its current valuation of just $2.50 a share. So needless to say, Ubisoft shareholders are not too happy. During an emergency conference call, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot and Frédéric Duguay, the company's CFO, fielded questions from various disgruntled shareholders about what the future of Ubisoft will be. However, Mr. Guillemot and Mr. Duguay were unable to offer any answers that shareholders deemed satisfactory during the meeting. The best Ubisoft has to offer right now is the quote from a press release, which is a little too business jargony to have to mention here. But for the layman, some have understood the quote to mean that Ubisoft is looking into fielding offers from companies who are interested in buying the Ubisoft brand. If this is to be taken seriously and the launch of Assassin's Creed Shadows is unsuccessful, this could spell the end of Ubisoft as we know it. We'll have more on this discussion with our guest this week, Victor Lucas, a little later on in the show. I love long games. I could play Minecraft or Baldur's Gate 3 for months and months and still find things to do because those games are designed to be limitless experiences. But I'm not always in the mood for an epic adventure. There are some days where I only have enough bandwidth for a few quick rounds of Marvel Rivals with my friends, and that's it. In an interview conducted on the Kiwi Talks podcast, Will Shen, a former designer at Bethesda, believes that more and more people feel this way and as a result are seeking out shorter games like the indie horror title Mouthwashing. He says, quote, "A large section of the audience is becoming fatigued at investing 30 plus, 100 plus hours into a game. Mouthwashing is a huge hit because it's short. There are other factors into that. The execution, nice iconic key art, all that kind of stuff. But that game doesn't succeed nearly as well if it were longer and had a bunch of side quests and miscellaneous content. The shortness is the point, and that level of engagement was so refreshing to see from a developer who's done a lot of big games. It's like, oh, you can have a fan community conversation around a game that's much shorter because the shortness allows everyone to engage fully with the entirety of the product." I think to some degrees, Will Shen is right. One of the things I find so appealing about shorter games is that sense of finality you get knowing that once you've beat a game, that's it. There's no DLC or new game plus. It's game over. And that's great because that means I can move on to the next game in my backlog, which is a topic for another time. Now let's quickly go over the games releasing this week.
Games out this week.
On January 14th, Hyper Light Breaker dashes exclusively onto PC. January 15th, we get Aloft soaring onto PC. Then on January 16th, Arcanage plants itself on Steam VR and PSVR 2. Assetto Corsa Evo drifts onto PC and PSVR. Morgul Regast Rage double jumps onto PS5, PC, Switch, and Xbox Series X and S. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD barrels exclusively onto the Nintendo Switch. And on January 17th, Dynasty Warriors Origins hacks and slashes its way onto PS5, PC, and Xbox Series X and S. Tales of Graces, F Remastered, ships onto all platforms. Then on January 20th, The Dark Side of Seklan crash lands exclusively on PC. The Epic Games Store is offering just one free game this week, Escape Academy, which will be available for download from January 16th until the 23rd.
Quest complete.
So that's the news for this week. It's now time to chat with our guest, Victor Lucas. Joins us to chat about our thoughts on where Ubisoft is headed and whether 100-hour video games are dying.
Select game mode. Multiplayer.
Hey, Victor. Welcome back to your first episode of the year with me. Thank you so much for joining again.
I'm so glad to be here. Happy New Year, and thank you for having me back on.
Yeah, you're always welcome. I love your perspective on stuff. Speaking of which, it's just announced that Assassin's Creed Shadows was delayed. Additionally, some of their stock's not doing too well. They've gone through the ringer, I feel like.
Yep.
So I want to gain your perspective. I want to know what you think about what's going on with Ubisoft.
I think that Ubisoft fell into a trap of trying to keep up with other types of games that have been very successful. And I think I'm specifically targeting the live service phenomenon that has done some real damage, I feel, to the video game industry. There's been some awesome successes, and there are some game ideas that really fit that live service model. But I think a lot of publishers at scale with these huge companies and huge teams and international development happening really kind of thought of titles that would keep people locked in them for as long as possible and iterated on that concept over and over again. And even though at their core, these games have been wonderful, they've also dealt with the fact that people have a finite amount of time and patience and have hit sort of ceilings on how many experiences they can revisit that feel similar. And I think as good as these games are, and I can think of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that was an amazing game, but I think it just went on too long. It was just too big and too ambitious. And you saw that with the last Assassin's Creed game where they scaled back quite a bit. And I think Shadows is also quite a bit more focused. Shadows has been through its own bout of controversy around its authenticity and its the decisions narratively to kind of focus on some elements of Japanese culture, but they've obviously been blown up and fictionalized and fantasized, which has been a huge part of what Assassin's Creed games have been all the way along, to be honest. But Ubisoft has a bit of a target on its back because it has, chased these big budget bets with live service experiences, maybe put out too many sequels too consecutively.
Yeah.
Had a little bit less experimentation. But, at the same time, Ubisoft is a formidable entertainment juggernaut, and they also have delivered so many excellent games to us. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown was an incredible game last year.
Yeah.
Just an amazing, unequivocal, just smash, beautiful experience. Not enough people played. And I also am a big fan of Star Wars Outlaws, which I think maybe could have used even a little more time to cook in the oven for sure, but it was a beautiful escape into the Star Wars universe with some really incredible details and excellent development from Massive. But I think it was also kind of consumed by this existing negative bubble that surrounds Ubisoft right now. So they're in a pickle for sure. I think their only way out of it is to be creative. I mean, that's their history. That's their only way out of it. They have to be creative with their game ideas, and maybe that means some massive, terrible restructuring. But they need to get back to what they're about. And, I've been covering Ubisoft for so long. I think it's an incredible company. I think the story of this family creating this international juggernaut of a company is amazing, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And I think when companies chase trends, whether they're in the movie industry or the video game industry or books or whatever, you run the risk of exhausting the very people that got you to your place in the first place. I mean, we saw that with Tomb Raider. We saw that with Guitar Hero. We've seen that with the sports titles. It's a prevalent and persistent and recurring theme in video games, and Ubisoft is going through it right now.
The question is, do they retire Assassin's Creed? Do we give it more time, like you said, more time to cook, perhaps? I wonder what like you said, I think it's about reshuffling, refocusing, and making sure that whatever they're focusing on, it's like it's a game that they're passionate about, and they're not just doing it for, to make stockholders happy, because it's not working anymore.
Naomi, the thing that I keep coming back to is that Nintendo shows people how to do it.
Oh, yeah.
They release one major Mario game per generation of hardware.
Yeah.
They release one Mario Kart per generation of hardware. They weirdly, they released 2 massive Zelda games in one generation, but it also evoked the Ocarina of Time Majora's Mask kind of model that they did the Nintendo 64. But Nintendo knows how to make every single game, whether it's big or small, an event, and they know how to celebrate it, and they know how to get people salivating to jump on board. And I don't think they also deliver a lot of games, and they also have a lot of smaller bets as well that end up being not massive, maybe financial smashes like some Mario or Zelda games can be, but they obviously find their market, and it's a good market for Nintendo, and they're there with that choice for consumers out there. And Ubisoft should follow that,
Yeah.
I keep thinking every publisher should follow that. I mean, they're and Nintendo sticks with it too. They don't always have the hits, right? They have the Wii U that doesn't really smash and doesn't really break through, but people at that company still find a way to stay the course and pivot and come out with new hardware. They've really had this up and down kind of trajectory with their hardware, but they've stayed focused on just making games and just delivering. So I hate Nintendo to take over this whole conversation, but it took them decades before they said, you know what, let's try a movie again. Though they have the biggest brands in the world. It's like, well, maybe people would come to a movie, and you know what, they did.
They did.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like you said, don't chase trends. And, realistic graphics, they can only take you so far. I feel like when it comes to gameplay, like focusing on the fun of a game is key. And we're seeing a lot of that. Like it actually comes back to another article that came out this week. A Starfield designer said people have the 100-hour game fatigue.
They do.
We're looking for shorter, more, polished, but like just more about the fun type of games.
Yes.
Would you say that's true? Would you say that that's accurate?
Here's my thing. And it goes to live service again as well, because those games are engineered to be 1,000-hour games. Those are never-ending experiences. If you are taking that consumer off the table of looking around for the next escape and the next game to get into, you're hurting your business. It's as simple as that. You're just clogging the pipe, with people just playing that one thing over and over and over and over and over again. And it does damage. People are like, I got my Fortnite, I'm good. And I'm not throwing shade at Fortnite. Fortnite's amazing. And what they've done with Fortnite is unbelievable. But we can't only have Fortnites,
That's right.
And we can't only have Starfields. And I feel like we came from eras where things weren't always connected online. They didn't have this persistent sort of upgrade path.
That's right.
We're on version 1.8 of a piece of software and new additions. And so a game that you get on launch day is a totally different thing in a few months. And it's just engineered to be there forever. We came from a time in games where they were around 10 or 20 hours, a lot of titles, and you'd finish them, you complete them. Maybe it's a 7.5 or an 8.5 out of 10 or something. Maybe it's not 10 out of 10, but it's like, well, that was really fun. What can I play now? And you kind of look to the next thing. And the companies were smaller, the ideas were smaller, but companies were able to ride these waves. And so if something came out and wasn't, the major atomic bomb blast on Metacritic, they wouldn't disappear, which is what happens now. It's like, oh yeah, you got to get your 9s and above or 90s and above, and or you're done. Or everybody's laid off, and no, it's really sad. And I totally believe that, the perfect example was Astrobot. Astrobot was the Game of the Year winner at the Game Awards. And maybe not enough people have played it because of, they're busy in 100-hour games, probably.
Yeah. And it's limited to PS5 too.
Limited to PS5. Yeah. But God, it's a perfect example of like beautiful fidelity, a manageable team size of 60 people, a terrific length, some additional free downloadable pieces that make the game fun to revisit, lots of replayability because the stages have lots of little secrets and things. just wonderfully designed. Very Nintendo-like, to be honest.
Yeah.
As was referenced on stage.
Yeah. Platformer style.
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking of Nintendo. They keep showing people how to do this, to make each game a gift, and to be like this interactive toy that we love while we play, and then we dream about them and think about them still, and we love to revisit them over time. And there's a magic to that kind of thinking, and I feel like the game industry could ease off on this, like our game is going to take over your whole life
for as long as you live. Yeah.
Right. And then what happens? You end up playing the game until you hate the game.
Yeah.
And how many times have we heard that? It's like, it feels like a chore. Like I've played this forever. I don't want to play it anymore. I just want it to end. And honestly, I kind of felt that with Tears of the Kingdom. I felt like that was too long.
It was very bloated. It was I'm still tackling it. I play it when I travel, but it's a big game. It's a big game.
I think there's a detriment. I understand if you buy 4 games a year or 3 games a year, you want the most bang for your buck.
That's right.
But there are a lot of awesome games out there. There are a lot of awesome 10-hour games out there.
Yeah.
I think that's why the retro scene has blown up over the last little while too. I think people are just like super psyched to play old PlayStation.
Or just like Balatro, it's like a card game, but it's simple.
That'll take over your life.
That will also take over. So true. Well, thank you so much. I wonder if this is just we revisit. It might be a bit of a constricting of the industry for a little bit because there's a lot of bloated companies out there, bloated video games. We have so many games. Like it's the constant joke. We all have a backlog. We have enough games to play until we all die and a new generation is born. So I think you're right in that sense, and I think there's there needs to be a revisiting and a refocus. I think that's
AAA 10-hour games would be amazing, and especially if they come down in price as opposed to this move to.
And that's the other thing, the price point.
Yeah. The price to make and the price to buy to get more people to play,
Exactly.
and then they jump on to the next one. I also feel like with all these subscriptions, and this is a whole other conversation, that first couple of hours is so incredibly important, and it's almost like the. Pilot episode of a show on streaming now. It has to come out of the gates with a big bang to get you kind of like, oh, wow, I got to stay tuned with this. And games kind of have to start that way too. I think the idea of the first 10 hours being slow, hold your hand, throw away stuff, that's got to go away too.
Agreed. Well, always so great to have your perspective on stuff. This was a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining the show. As always, I hope you'll come back, but I know you will.
Oh, let's do it again. We just barely scratched the surface. That was awesome.
It's just
Thank
the
you,
start
Naomi.
of the year, too. All right. Later, Victor. Victor Lucas is creator and host of the Electric Playground Network. You can follow him on Twitter at Victor_Lucas.
Flawless victory! Continue!
And that's This Week in Gaming. I'm your host, Naomi Kyle, and I had such a blast bringing you all the latest in games this week. Thank you so much for listening, and shout out to my co-writer, Josh Seaman. Please don't forget to let me know what you're playing and what you think about these stories by tagging me at Naomi Kyle on social. And from all of us here at This Week in Gaming, we wish you a gaming-filled week, and we'll see you again same time next week. Thanks for listening.
This Week in Gaming is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Download the iHeartRadio app for more podcasts just like these.
Metallica's M72 World Tour is blazing through Toronto.
Heavy Rock has your exclusive in
2 nights, 2 unique sets.
Want to win? Download the free iHeartRadio app and rock out with iHeart Heavy Rock.
10 minutes of daily streaming enters you to win an epic Metallica iHeartRadio experience.
4 nights of hotel, $500, and tickets to see Metallica at the Rogers Center.
The more iHeart Heavy Rock you stream, the more chances to win.
Details at iHeartRadio.ca.